Hello. For a while I've been thinking about making a video about the guitar collection that Christine and I have, and I thought I would do that. However, I thought I would do it in the decades. We've actually got at the moment 53 guitars in the collection, and most of the recent ones actually have been ones that Christine have collected. But if we go back to the beginning, which would be the 1970s, I can show you some of the guitars that we collected back then. This first one is an audition guitar, electric guitar, and to be honest, this was a guitar that was bought by my brother Ernest. This is the late 60s audition guitar, audition being the trade name for Woolworths. And these guitars are made in the Tiesco factory in Japan and brought in by Woolworths and sold. This one cost £12, 10 shillings in 1969, I think it was. And my brother Ernest was going to learn the guitar, and in fact he learnt a few chords and then the guitar was left lying around. So when I started a new school in about 72, 73, I stuck up my hand in second year I joined, and I stuck up my hand and said I wanted to take guitar lessons when they were asking, and this was the guitar that I used for those guitar lessons. Perfectly playable guitar. However, I have it tuned at the moment. I use this as a Nashville electric, so that means it's got the high strings off a 12 string on it only. It gives you a really ringing sound, so it's a very useful guitar for that reason. And it was nice, and I used that guitar for a couple of years at school, played occasional school concerts with it, etc. And then in 74 I purchased from a music shop called GET in White Inch in Glasgow. I purchased an Epiphone guitar. I'm just going to unplug this, it'll be a bit noisy. And this is the Epiphone ET270 guitar. It's a lovely guitar, and at the time I bought it, it was £45 in 1974, and I used this guitar for a couple of years. It's still a lovely guitar. Interestingly, it was also a favourite of Kurt Cobain, and since people have recognised that this was a guitar that he used, I think it maybe appears in one of the covers of one of the Nirvana albums, these guitars have become worth a lot more. This isn't in fact the actual original guitar that I had. That original guitar got chipped down in this bit down here, and I then took all of the paint off it and I gave it to a friend who was going to put it all back together for me and improve it, etc. And after a couple of years of waiting, he simply disappeared. I think he went off to America. I met him again in the 1990s, so we're talking about 76 or 77 here. I met him again in the 1990s and he didn't know where the guitar was, forgotten completely about it. However, lovely guitar, cherry burst, beautiful P90 pickups, well sought after pickups here. Epiphone, of course, are making guitars in Japan from 69 onwards, although owned by Gibson, and these were some of their original guitars that they made, not copies of Gibsons, not copies of anything in fact, and a lovely guitar. These will now, a guitar in this condition, because this one's great condition and the tremolo works, would be easily £1,000 now, especially with that Kurt Cobain connection to it. So, nice guitar, plays well, and I used it for a few years. The next guitar that I actually got was in 1976, and my mother had, when I was born, put a wee insurance policy on there for me. Sorry about the racket. put a wee insurance policy away for me, and when I was 16 in 1976, I got £56 from that insurance policy. She'd been paying up every month since I was born for 16 years. And £56 was enough in those days to buy a guitar. This one, as you can see, is a J200 copy, an Epiphone, another made in Japan Epiphone. It's the FT170BL, I think, or was it 370? I think it might be the 370. Anyway, a blonde J200 shaped guitar, lovely guitar, and I got this from a shop, Biggers, in Glasgow. And the interesting thing about that was that the shop, Biggers, had these guitars at £120. Now I only had 56, and I could probably scrape another £15 together. So the guy in the shop said to me, well, look, I've got one that the action's really high on, and if you don't mind the high action, I could sell you that for £70. And that the action was really high on it. There was something wrong with the neck and the bridge as well. I think the bridge was rising on it. So I took that into school and showed my guitar teacher, Ronald McEachen, my new guitar, and he said, the action's terrible. I said, yes, that's why it was so cheap that I could afford it, £70. And he said, that's no good. So he took it back to Biggers, and he did a lot of business with Biggers, and they sent it off back to Epiphone in London. The London Epiphone sent it to Luthier. The Luthier fixed it all up, and it was sent back about a month later, and it's been a beautiful guitar with great action ever since. And I thought to myself, a bit unfair, because Biggers basically gave me almost at half price, and in the end they had to pay for the repairs to it, or Epiphone had to pay for the repairs to it, and I got a good guitar out of it at a bargain price. And I played this guitar as an acoustic for many, many years, up until about 1979. It was the only acoustic that I had, and I learned to play fingerstyle, etc. on it. Let me now jump to a guitar that Christine, her first guitar, and she bought a 12-string guitar from McCormack's in Glasgow, and I think she said she paid £79 for it. And Christine actually only really plays 12 strings. She does play nylon string as well, and now these days, of course, she plays resonator guitar as well, plays dulcimer. But back then she was determined to play 12 string, which was difficult to play. She keeps it tuned down a tone, which makes the pressure easier, and it takes the strain off the neck. And this one's had to have a repair to the neck because the neck dried out a bit and the glue started to come out, so the neck's been re-glued on this. It's a beautiful guitar. It's a Cemar Dove guitar from 1977. I put the pickup on it in the early 2000s, the same with the Epiphone. I added a pickup at that point because by the time we got to the early 2000s, you couldn't really play anywhere without having an amplified guitar. And this one is terrific, and it got Christine started on 12-string guitars, of which she now has many that you'll be seeing in this collection. So 77, we've reached this. Of course, I couldn't be left out, and I had to buy a 12-string a couple of years later. However, the next guitar that I really got, because by this time Christine was playing in the band, doing the singing in the band, and we were playing 2 nights a week for between 77 and 80. We were playing 2 nights a week all year, and more at Christmas and New Year time. And we were under an agent called Harry Margolis, who often said to me, he treated me like a son if I ever complained about anything. And to be honest, he was a great agent, and somebody that I admire. He had a big band, and he never did any wrong by us, to be perfectly honest. It was always he gave his work. So I got this guitar. This was actually, I was working in a music shop at that point, although still still quite young, and this came in from a guy from a band called Sneaky Pete. He wanted to buy another guitar, an Ibanez Artist guitar that I later bought off him as well. And this guitar, he was the lead singer and he didn't play guitar too much in the band, but he wanted to trade this in against the Ibanez Artist, and we would have given him £60 for this then second hand, and his Ibanez Artist was £200, so that left him £140 to pay. But we were able to do a little sort of deal. I bought this off him for £80. He could then use that £80 against the £200 guitar, but because he was now paying cash for the guitar, he could get 10% off. So now that guitar was only costing him £80. I gave him the £80 for this, and he was able to come up with the other £100. So in the end, everybody came out the deal better off. So lovely guitar. I'll quickly plug it in if I can. Just to let you hear it. Excuse me moving about in front of the camera. And the strange thing about Shergold guitars is that they have a control for each pickup. So you've got out of phase because of humbuckers, single coil and humbucker for each of the two pickups. So there's quite a range of tones, and you can select one pickup or the other, volume and tone. And it's also got the bridge cover, which a lot of Shergold guitars have lost over the years. These became very popular with the Manchester bands of the 80s. And this is a really good example. No checking on it. I paid £80 for it. Probably these days it's worth £500, £600, maybe even more. Nice guitar. So I mentioned that I had purchased a 12 string. So again, we're talking about 78 or thereabouts. And I purchased this 12 string. This is a Yamaha FG 4112 SB, and I paid £78 for it. And it's another guitar. Christine keeps it tuned down. She plays it now rather than me, and she keeps it tuned down to D, a tone down, and it's a really nice guitar. In some ways not quite as nice as the CMAR, but it's a very loud guitar and quite useful if we're playing in a folk club or something like that without amplification. But it's a beauty, as you can see, sunburst finish on it, the typical Yamaha pattern, and open headstock here. The last guitar that I got in the 70s, well, before I tell you about this last guitar, I actually bought the Ibanez Artist electric guitar off the same singer for Sneaky Pete, and I also bought a 12 string version of that, and they've become very valuable guitars, but unfortunately I sold those in the 1990s. There's only 3 guitars that I've really ever sold. There was those 2 Artist guitars, which again I got, compared to what they're worth now, I got very little in the early 1990s. And my brother Richard had bought a Fender in the early 80s that I'll tell you more about, and it was an Antigua finish, and again I sold that in the early 90s, and of course since then they've gone through the roof, worth thousands and thousands and thousands because of the rare finish on them. However, for £420 back in 1979 I bought this Ovation guitar, which actually I think dates from 78, so it was probably been in the shop quite a while. And I had a choice. They had a Martin guitar for about the same price, 420, or they had the Ovation guitar here. It's an Ovation Artist, so it's a thin body one. But what I really needed was a guitar to play in the band, so I had an acoustic guitar that could be amplified. And in those days, really, Ovation were the only guitars that had the amplification on them, and you could simply plug them in and play them. And this is a lovely guitar, and probably was my main acoustic for playing out between 79 and probably 2001, when I got a Gibson guitar that I'll tell you about later as well. So that's it really. Some of the stories about the guitars. Well, this lovely Epiphone here, I used in a school concert back in 1975-76, and this lovely girl called Christine, that I later married, came up to me and asked if she could borrow it for the concert because she was playing Kathy's song in that concert, and she got up and she fingerpicked that guitar and she made it sound lovely, and after that I decided to try and learn how to fingerpick and play the guitar. So that's a nice story about that guitar. The Epiphone ET270, I play on the only film I have of the band playing back in a school concert back in 1976 as well. So these guitars mean a lot to me. We've kept them for a long time. Christine Seymour was her main guitar up until she bought another guitar in the early 1990s, and we've enjoyed it. So next video I'll talk about the guitars that we got in the 1980s. Bye.